All right, welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is The Revolutionary War, Part 2. We're going to talk about 5 terms that, as you go through your books and your reading, in order to kind of get a sense of what's happening, you should kind of key in on these terms because the revolution is a it's certainly something that is still arguably very political even today, and I would argue that the way that folks kind of learn about it in a K through 12 environment is not always the best. Let's dig into it. So number one, loyalists. All right. So the usual percentages that is given out is that around sort of like a third, right? So a third of the colonials, right, third of the Americans, right, supported the revolution. A third were kind of in between, and a third were were loyalists or Tories. They were very pro-British. That middle group, that middle third, they're kind of supportive of the revolution, but that third that's pro-Brit, right, they're pro-British, and they're a part of this process. And so you really do see some difficult things being meted out against families and businesses and property and communities where folks are supportive of the British and the Crown. You have families being disrupted and marriages ending, right? You've got a lot of conflict here. You've got folks leaving certain areas to go serve in the British military. Perhaps most famous with this, Benedict Arnold, a very, very good combat leader for the Americans. Perhaps one of the best combat officers that the American Army had. Felt that he was being slighted for rank and position, and so he eventually he goes over to the British, and of course is noted as a traitor. But we should understand that the loyalist position is a part of this process. Some of them will eventually make their way up to Canada after the war is over. Others will go back to England. Others will try to return and get their land and homes back and farms back and that kind of thing. So it varies widely, but it's part of the process. All right. Number 2, Hessians. All right. Hessians. Hessians are basically German mercenaries. They're hired by the Crown, and they're part of the invasion in 1776 when the British Navy, the Royal Navy, deploys to New York. And you see fighting not only in Manhattan, but across modern New York City. And the Hessians, from the continental perspective, were kind of noted for their professionalism. They're professional European soldiers, which also means they're kind of roughnecks. They're brutal guys. They were noted for their mistreatment of civilians, particularly role of sexual violence and rape of American women, right? Sort of this kind of thing. They're not well liked, the Hessians, although some of them will eventually, they don't really want to be here, and so some of the others will desert and try to start up in the colonies and that kind of thing. Number 3 would be Saratoga. All right, Saratoga. Couple of things to keep in mind with Saratoga. It's a battle, happens in 1777, eventually a siege. The big part of it that comes out of this is that you basically get a field army of the British to surrender. And what will happen is that the French will look at that and decide to kind of give more aid to the Americans. Now, we also need to recognize that while Saratoga is a reflection of failures of British strategy, which had changed at the beginning of 1777, Saratoga isn't the only battle in the war. And there is often an effort on the part of folks to think that all you need to know is Saratoga, and then that's it, and you're good when it comes to the American Revolution. The last major engagement for the colonies happens in 1781, nearly 4 years later. It's called the Battle of Yorktown, and that's our 4th term. But the fact that Saratoga and Yorktown are 4 years apart should tell us that there is a lot more to this conflict than just success at Saratoga. Now, the Battle of Yorktown occurred after a very successful series of Southern campaigns and strategy overseen partly by General Nathaniel Greene, by his officers, and by the Continental Army in conjunction with the militia as well. The idea was to try to push the Cornwallis-led British forces north as best as possible, and that Washington would provide assistance, the French would provide assistance, and that there could be some measure of like a pincer movement to kind of close in on them. And they do, and Yorktown is a success for the Americans. But again, when it comes to Yorktown, we should also acknowledge that it's as much a French victory as well. Now, number 5, our last point, the Newburgh Conspiracy. The Newburgh Conspiracy. So, war ends theoretically in 1781 with the last major battle, but that's not really clear. So the armies kind of stick around. There is some sense of there are some British troops around, North America. Is there going to be more fighting? Is there going to be another battle? Kind of waiting for orders, right? And then there's a treaty in Paris in 1783 that brings the war to an end. Well, as the war had been going on, particularly the Continental Army hadn't really been paid that well. Continental scrip, the currency that had been given out, wasn't really worth very much, and the Continental officers hadn't exactly been paid. So there was some conspiracy or debate over a coup or some kind of action against Congress to get the officers, some kind of redress. Now, Washington kind of nips this one in the bud. He kind of puts a stop to this by coming in and making this very dramatic appeal. He pulls out his spectacles, these glasses, and he drops them, fumbles with them. Gentlemen, I've grown old in for my country, this kind of thing. And the officers kind of back off. Now, there is a bit of debate over how serious that they were going to take this, but Washington took it seriously enough to try to stop it, and he kind of does. Now, eventually, Congress is going to appropriate funds for the troops, for the officers, something like 5 years worth of pay. But again, the Continental scrip that they're going to get paid with here, some of this money is not worth all that much, and so there's a bit of an issue there. All right, thanks so much.